Today is Father's Day, and I wasn't raised with a father, and I had a really great single mom. She was this lady from Sicily, and she was kind of a crook, and we always did everything we could to get by. And then she had a fat little boy for a kid, and I loved drawing He-Man. I had no athletic ability. I would just sit and draw. I wanted to be an actor. And then all of a sudden, when I was 9 years old, 10 years old, this guy came in called Mike Hodges, and he was Mr. Missouri. And he was a professional bodybuilder. And when he would take me around, he'd always be like, "Hey, this is my son." And everybody's like, "He's your son?" And he was like, "Oh, no, stepson." And they're like, "Oh, okay, he's your stepson. I understand." And I took so much offense even at that age. I was like, "Well, why don't people think he's my son?" And he's like, "You know what? We got to get you into some sports." So we started getting me in football, which was tough because he was also the strength coach for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he had to take his fat little son around, and everybody would do the "he's your son." And then he got me involved in martial arts, which was great because I loved Bruce Lee, I loved Jackie Chan, and so I took martial arts all the way through high school. So now cut to sophomore year in high school. So I'm sophomore in high school, and I always hate to admit when people ask and talk about high school, they're like, "Oh God, did you hate high school?" And I was like, "No, I freaking loved high school. Like, I was ridiculously popular." And I was popular, and I played football, and I was on the varsity team, and in this small town of Blue Springs, Missouri, because I was in karate and I would travel internationally for this Kempo, and I was a black belt in karate, I was the guy in this small town that it was like, "You gotta fucking stay away from Lorenzo Hodges. That guy he's bad." And so I was the badass. I walked around, I act like a badass. Like, if there was a problem in the parking lot, I was like, do we have a problem here? You got a problem? All right, well, just go on. And people were legitimately afraid of me, and it was nice. And I hung out with the popular people, and it was great. Well, one day, this girl came up to me, and she was really upset, and she's like, a freak cut me off in the parking lot, and he was wearing a Metallica t-shirt, and he yelled at me, and he called me bad words, and I was like, "Where is he? Where's this dude?" And she's like, "His name's Billy Ely." And I was like, "I don't know who this Billy Ely is, but he's gonna have a problem." So we go up, and we find him in the hallway, and I was like, "Hey, I heard you're messing with Sissy." And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, after school, let's do it." He's like, "All right." And I was like, "Excuse me?" He was like, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's go. And let's meet after school." And I was like, "Yeah, dude, bro. Yeah, all right." So all day I was so excited. And this will sound made up, but I had an art class that day. And I was pretty good at drawing because when I was 9, I would draw He-Man until my dad actually became He-Man. Side note about my dad, because my friend loves this part of the story. When he would get ready for bodybuilding competitions, my stepdad, he would wear a Speedo, and he'd mow the yard in a Speedo in 1986. In Missouri. And I was always so torn because I was like, well, we should be making fun of him, but he could beat, and I literally was the "my dad could beat up your dad" guy, you know? But it is weird that he wore a Speedo. So anyways, I'm in art class, and my hand to God, we had silk screening that day, and I silk screened a Geek Destroyer t-shirt, and it was a guy with my football number 32, stomping on a geek. And I cut off the sleeves because that's what douchebags do. And I was a massive douchebag. And I got this shirt all ready. And so after school, my dad also restored cars. So I had a sick 66 Mustang convertible. And so I left, and football practice was happening. And so I couldn't go to football practice, but I told my friends, I was like, "Guys, I'm going to kick Billy's ass. Then I'll meet you guys afterwards for football practice." They're like, "Yeah, of course, you're going to kick his ass." And so I asked around about Billy, and nobody really knew who he was other than he wore a Metallica t-shirt. You've got to, of course, beat up a guy that wears Metallica t-shirts, and he hung out with the freaks. And I found out that because he had a short haircut, and all the rest had long haircut, that he had already done his basic training or ROTC or something for the Marines. And so I was like, well, that's no big deal. They don't teach them the kind of martial arts that I have. They just like jump over sticks and stuff. And so I'm going to kill this dude. And so, getting my Mustang, none of my friends came because they were all in football, and we meet in the parking lot. And there's literally hundreds of people there. And I was like, "Oh my God, this is great. Like, this is going to solidify my legendary status in high school." So we go, and they're like, you know what, we better go somewhere else. So we go to an old town road, because that's what you do in Blue Springs, Missouri, and there's gravel there. And I forgot that before the fight, I go by to tell my mom, like, hey, and dad, this guy was rude to my friend Sissy, and she was, of course, in the car with me with my date, Wendy Higgins, who was the super popular cheerleader. And we never really dated, but I was trying to impress her, and this was totally going to help me. And I just remember my mom saying, like, listen, I totally think it's great because we spent a lot of money to get you your black belt if you kick his ass, but we need you to make sure he punches you first. And I was like, oh, yeah, bro, that's no problem. So we go, and there's all these people, and I jump out of the Mustang convertible instead of opening the door, because that's what you do when you're about to kick, you know, a guy that wears a Metallica t-shirt's ass. And we're standing there, and I was like, all right, bro, let's do this. And he's like, all right, bro, let's do this. So we're broing and broing. And he's got all of his like things there, and I was like, come on, hit me. If you're gonna talk these big words. He's like, no, you hit me. And nobody's hitting anybody, so I think his parents gave him the same legal advice. I'm not positive. And so I was thinking, like, what can I do? And I was like, well, you know what? I asked around some of the Marine guys about you, and they said you're a pansy. And he was like, he started crying. He's like, no, my brothers would never call me a pansy. Like, there's no way. And I was like, that's what they said. And he's like, no, that's not possible. I was like, they did. So he started swinging and running towards me. And then this is where everything goes south. So the karate that I studied was called Kempo, and it's not like Taekwondo. Now, Taekwondo is the big, flashy kicks and flying. Kempo was a lot about grappling and low kicks and finishing a fight fast. And really, if your karate instructor knew you were even fighting in the first place, you get in trouble because you're not supposed to do that. All the honor. But I thought I had honor because he yelled at a girl in a parking lot. So he's swinging towards me, so I'm like, oh, this is going to go on. I get out of the way, and now all of a sudden I'm like the Karate Kid. I'm doing flying kicks through the air, trying to do spinning kicks and jumping, because I was like, this is sick. I jumped out of my Mustang. I got Wendy Higgins with me. This is going to go down. I instantly slip on the gravel, and he simply just gets on top of me like a big brother does, and he just starts banging, just beating the shit out of me. And I couldn't get out. He's on top of me. And then now his other freaks come, because I was making fun of the freaks all day. And I'm also wearing my Geek Destroyer t-shirt, which now has blood on it. And they all come up and take turns kicking me. And then they leave. And then I have to get back in my Mustang. But this time, because I'm hurt, I open the door like a normal person. And I drive myself to the emergency room. And I couldn't talk. I just kept on crying over and over. A geek beat me up. A geek beat me up. And then when they check in the emergency room, they say, what happened? And I said, a geek beat me up. I'm no longer a legend in Blue Springs, Missouri. And then, this is pre-cell phone, of course, Wendy Higgins calls the school, and she wasn't the brightest, but she was very, very hot. And she called, which is crazy because now she's a nurse, and God bless her, and I'm proud of her. But she calls the school and tells them I'm in ICU and not ER. So everybody from the football team comes while I'm getting the stitches on my eyes, and all I can do is bawl over and over, a geek beat me up, a geek beat me up, which I completely and utterly deserved. So after that, I was no longer a legend in Blue Springs, Missouri, and Wendy Higgins didn't date me, and I had the nickname Karate Kid, and then it was changed to Just Friends Larry, because she just wanted to be friends with me. And I, after that, never got in an actual fight for years and years, and my mystique was gone. And I saw him at an Applebee's like 10 years later. And he was there with his wife at the time, and he was no longer in active duty. And I went up and I was like, hey, Billy Ely, it's Lorenzo, AKA Just Friends Larry. And I apologize for trying to fight you, and thank you for beating me up, because it taught me humility. And it taught me that if I would have fought somebody that actually had skills, I would have probably had the shit kicked out of me, because karate in a dojo is much different than fighting on the streets. So that's my story.